Shalom, Israel. I want to talk about this topic. The Gentiles are Israelite foreigners. Because you got some Israelites that teach that the Gentiles is always talking about the other nations, and that it's never talking about Israelite foreigners. So what I want to do is go through a little history and of course the scriptures and prove that the Gentiles that were grafted in was indeed talking about Israelite foreigners and not the other nations. Now, there's two things you have to understand to see this clearly. The first thing is this. You must understand that there are two sets of Gentiles. All right? You have the other nations that are not Israelites. They are Gentiles, yes. But the Gentiles that were grafted into the covenants, the Gentiles that were prophesied to come to the truth, the Gentiles that Paul taught, those were Israelites that were scattered in other lands. And we're going to prove that. The second thing you need to know is the history behind the Israelites being scattered into these different lands. Here's a short, quick version of what happened. Now be patient, because all this is necessary to understand who the Gentiles are. All right, here we go. When King David was ruling, he ruled over the entire nation of Israel, all 12 tribes. When King Solomon came into power, Solomon went off into sin. As a result, the Most High split the kingdom of Israel into two separate kingdoms. You got to understand that. You had the southern kingdom, which is referred to as the house of Judah in the Bible, which consists of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And you had the northern kingdom, which is referred to as the house of Israel in the Bible, which consists of Ephraim, Manasseh, Simeon, Gad, all the way down to Issachar. Now, after the split, these two kingdoms were considered by the Most High and the people who live in them to be two totally separate kingdoms and two totally separate nations. Remember that, two totally separate kingdoms and two totally separate nations. And you could read the history of the kingdom being split in 1 Kings. Go straight to chapter 11, you can get the point. Now, after the split, the Israelites went into several captivities. You had the Assyrian captivity, the Babylonian captivity, the Persian Mede captivity, and the Greek captivity. As a result of all these different captivities, you had Israelites scattered all over the place. You had Israelites living in Rome, Corinth, Galatia, Ephesus, Philippi, Thessalonica, which, by the way, these are all the places that Paul sent letters to. And he just happened to send letters to these places where Israelites were scattered, but he was sending them to the other nations. Come on, y'all. Think about that. But anyway, you had Israelites even down in Egypt. Basically, Israelites was everywhere outside of Jerusalem. So here's the point. In the land of Jerusalem, during the time of Christ, you mainly only had the house of Judah, which consists of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Now, there were small remnants of some of the other tribes, but mainly and predominantly, you had Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. This history is crucial for you to know as an Israelite, because if you don't know this, you read the New Testament thinking that all 12 tribes are at full capacity in the land with Christ, and that's not how it was. And you got to know that to understand who the Gentiles really are. Now, very quickly, before we go to the scriptures, I just want to deal with this word Gentile. What does the word Gentile actually mean? Now, most people use the Strong's Concordance for their biblical definitions, so let's go there. Gentile is number 1471 in the Strong's Concordance. It's the Hebrew word goy, and the definition they give you is a foreign nation, hence a Gentile. So basically, a foreigner. Now, there's a great website called etymonline.com that gives you the etymology or the origin of words. I have it up on the screen. Let's go there and see what the origin of the word Gentile is. Here it is. The word Gentile comes from the Latin word gentilis, and the first definition is foreign. So that should be clear. The word Gentile simply means foreigner. In other words, a stranger. Now, why can I say it means stranger? Let's deal with the etymology of words. The word strange comes from the Latin word extraneous, which means foreigner. So Gentile, foreigner, and stranger is all the same word with the same meaning. Now, after getting that understanding, you cannot honestly say that the word Gentile in the Bible is always referring to the other nations. If you still say that after what we just went through, you're just not being honest. A foreigner or a stranger, which is what Gentile means, could be anybody. Gentile, foreigner, stranger, all the same word, which leads us to the first scripture. All right? 1 Peter 1:1. And it reads, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, Yahushua, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Now, based on the understanding of words that we got earlier, we know that the word stranger is the same as the word foreigner or Gentile. Why? Because the word stranger comes from the Latin word extraneous, which means foreigner. And foreigner is the definition of the word Gentile when you go to the origin of the word. So 1 Peter 1:1 could have read, Peter, an apostle of Yahushua, to the Gentiles scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Now, if you say the word Gentile could not have been there, then you missed the whole introduction, because we already proved that the word Gentile is the same as the word foreigner or stranger. So who were these strangers that were scattered that Peter was writing to? Well, James tells us exactly who they were because he wrote a letter to them and he identified who they are. Let's get it. James 1:1. James, a servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahushua, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Now, these are the same people that Peter wrote to, but Peter called them strangers, which is a foreigner or a Gentile, but James called them the 12 tribes. Now, I know we can't stop there. That's too easy, but I just wanted to make that point. I mean, that's simple within itself. All right, now I want to go to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. Now, remember, this letter is being addressed to the strangers that are scattered abroad. Verse 5 says, Ye also, as lively stones, are built up with a spiritual house and holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices, acceptable to the Most High by Yahushua. Now, I have a question. Verse 5 says, Ye also, as lively stones, are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood. Here's my question. Can the other nations be priests? Is not the priesthood set aside for Israelites? These scattered strangers are Israelites. And if you know that, that's good. But if you think that these scattered strangers are different people from the Gentiles that Paul went to teach, you're mistaken. And we're going to prove that these scattered strangers that Peter is writing to are the same Gentiles that Paul went to teach. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 7. Now remember, Peter is writing to the strangers that scattered abroad. Verse 7. Unto you therefore which believe, he is precious. But unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner, and a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. All right, now we got to point a few things out. Verse 7 says, But unto them which be disobedient, the stone which the builders disallowed, the same is made the head of the corner. Now, these builders that disallowed the stone is talking about the chief priests and the Pharisees. Now, let's go prove that, because, see, understanding all this is the key to understanding who the Gentiles are and how the Most High constructed all this for the purpose of bringing the Gentiles in, which are Israelite foreigners. Let's prove that. Matthew 21, 42 through 45. Verse 42. Yahushua saith unto them, Did ye never read in the scriptures the stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore say I unto you, the kingdom of the Most High shall be taken from you, and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. And when the chief priests and Pharisees had heard his parables, they perceived that he spake of them. So we see that the builders that rejected the stone was the chief priests and the Pharisees, basically the Jews or the house of Judah, Judah, Benjamin, Levi. So when Christ said that the kingdom of the Most High is going to be taken from you and given to another nation, he was talking to the house of Judah. They were the ones that disallowed the stone. They were the ones that rejected him. So this is Christ prophesying against the Jews or the house of Judah, letting them know that they were going to fall and that the Gentiles were going to come in. But what Gentiles? The other nations or the scattered Israelites? Let's go back to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 8 and bring out a little more. Verse 8. And a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. So Peter is telling these scattered strangers that the chief priests and the Pharisees, the Jews, he's telling them that the house of Judah stumbled at the word. But he also says, whereunto also they were appointed. What is he saying? In other words, it was set up by the Most High for them to go off. Why? Let's go to the scripture and see. Why was it set up for the house of Judah to go off? Romans 11, verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. So the house of Judah had to go off to make room for the scattered Israelite foreigners, the Gentiles. These Gentiles here in verse 25 that were grafted in are the same people that Peter was writing to, and the same people that Christ referred to in Matthew 21, verse 43. These were the Israelites that were scattered. This is not talking about the other nations. All right, let's go back to 1 Peter chapter 2 and pick it up at verse 10. He says, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of the Most High, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. So Peter tells these strangers that in the past they were not a people, but now they are the people of the Most High. Now let's go to the precept to this verse and see if this is talking about the other nations or Israelites. Hosea chapter 1, verse 10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Now we know without a shadow of a doubt that this is talking about the children of Israel, Israelites. Now, were these Israelites ever called Gentiles? Because remember, you got some of Israel teaching that the Israelites were never called Gentiles. Let's see if these Israelites that were not a people that became a people were called Gentiles or not.